Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org. Hi, this is Bill Kenower of Author Magazine, and today I'm in the home of Sarah L. Blum, author of Women Under Fire, Abuse in the Military. Sarah, welcome to Author.
Thank you, Bill. I'm glad to be here with you.
So, Sarah, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Publishing your book. Now, this has been a rather long journey.
7 years.
7 years to write it, but in a way the journey began 40 years ago almost, didn't it? In Vietnam.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
That's where your military experience began.
Right, 1967. I was an operating room nurse at Cu Chi, Vietnam, at the 12th Evacuation Hospital there. And we were right where all the fighting was happening, right beside the Hobo Woods, the Iron Triangle. My hospital was the largest user of fresh blood in all of Vietnam, so I saw the worst of war and the worst of what human beings do to one another.
And I barely need to even ask this question, but for anyone I've known who's gone to war, that it's a profoundly formative experience. Was that true for you also? Absolutely,
yeah. So I tell people it's the gift that goes on giving. It consistently gives, but yeah, I mean, I had to go through my own healing afterwards. You know, PTSD, flashbacks, and it was very, very unpleasant, kind of scary. You don't know what's happening to you. And then I was lucky that I was here in the Seattle area and I was able to get really good help and got help when all this happened. It actually didn't happen to me until 1981.
That's when your PTSD kicked in?
Right. I was actually already a nurse psychotherapist. I was on my way to work to see clients in Tacoma, and I was hearing on the radio the song, Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree, and the Iranian hostages were coming back. Yeah. And they were getting this celebration, and I didn't know what was happening to me. It felt like someone pulled a zipper down the front of me, and all this stuff was pouring out of me. And I said, well, what did they do to get this, celebration? What about us?
Right.
Right? Right. And that's how it started.
And part of your work has been with veterans, hasn't it, to helping them?
Yeah. Well, once I learned about PTSD from my own experiences, then I wanted to help others. And so I actually dedicated my life to helping veterans, active duty military, and other people who have trauma, PTSD trauma, or in the case of what I'm doing now, military sexual trauma or other sexual trauma.
Did this book begin because of your work with PTSD, that you began to meet a lot of women who were experiencing the trauma of having been sexually abused in the military? How did you come to this subject?
That's a good question, Bill. So in 1996, I'll take you back to 1996, you remember Dana Perry, who was a physicist and a peace activist here in the Seattle area. And so he and his wife, Geraldine Brousseau, they created the very first Peace Trees Vietnam program and trip. Okay. So I volunteered for that trip and wanted to go heal the land in Vietnam. And just before we left for the trip, Danon and I were talking, and he looked me right in the eye and he said, Sarah, somebody needs to write the women's story. And I said, okay. I mean, I heard him. There was nothing in my psyche about writing at that point.
And when he said the women's story, he wasn't referring necessarily to this story, but just the women's in the military.
Vietnam. Just talking about Vietnam.
The women in Vietnam.
So 1996, he said that to me, and I don't know if you know, but several days later he had a massive heart attack and died. So it was one of those messages that, but I still didn't do anything with it because I wasn't at that point. So then 10 years later, 2006, I was talking to a woman, a college professor, and she stopped mid-sentence to say to me, you know, you really need to write about the women in the military. And they came together inside me and created this, this passion, this fire. And so when I actually started, I started out to write women's stories in the military.
Sure.
That's where I went with it. And I was part way into that, and then I started to get some horrific stories of sexual assault and the retaliation. And I didn't know about that.
Right.
It was
you didn't experience it when you were...
I was shocked by it and the devastation of it. And the tenacity and the courage of the women who were telling me these stories. Yeah. But I still wasn't there. I was not on that frame of reference, right? I'm still writing about women in the military. So I was going to put those stories in and mix them with all the other stories, right? But then, 2008, I went to the Pacific Northwest Writers Association conference, right? So I started learning more about writing and publishing world and all of that. And it was the following year, 2009, at the conference, when I decided to turn over what I had written so far to a book doctor, Jason Black, right? And he gave me feedback. He gave me a tremendous amount of feedback, very detailed, specific, excellent feedback. But the key thing that he said was, look at these stories you have about sexual assault. You need to focus on that and write about the culture of abuse toward women in the military, because nobody's doing that.
I would think it'd be hard to write this book because I would be outraged. I would hear the stories and I would be filled with just the sort of crusaders' outrage for justice, but I know that that can interfere with the writing sometimes.
Yes.
And so what did you do with that? I mean, you're a woman, you've been in the military. To hear these stories, it must have been heartbreaking.
It was, but I'm also a psychotherapist.
And you've heard a lot of stories.
So I've heard, but also I have the ability to hold someone. So when I was doing these interviews, even though a lot of them were over the phone, I'm right there with them, literally holding them, kind of energetically holding them while they tell me their story. So if they tap into something that's very emotional, you know, I can stop.
You're the rock too, aren't
right.
you?
So I can stop the interview. At that moment, I'm not the writer. I'm their sister veteran. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a caring person, and I'm holding them while they work through their emotions. And then at the end, when they're kind of leveled out, do you want to go on? Do you want to reschedule? You know, how do you want to handle that? So I could do all of that with them.
So you've written about an injustice that's still happening, obviously. Your book will contribute, but obviously it's going to take more than one book to end something like this. I know it's pretty widespread.
Yeah.
How, emotionally, what do you do with that, knowing that you obviously want to be a part of it, but you know you can't just turn it off?
Yeah, it's frustrating. I have to stay really focused, really clear and really focused. My job right now feels like it's to educate the public, and that's the whole purpose of that book. Right. It's to educate the public and hopefully inspire them to call their senators and their representatives so that we can get some changes made. So yeah, so I've done a lot of things and I'm still doing things. Like I went back to Washington, D.C. I don't know if you know this, but I went to Washington, D.C. in November, right after Veterans Day. So the Congress came back into session right after Veterans Day. So I was there for Veterans Day. I told my personal story at the Vietnam Women's Memorial for the first time. So that was,
congratulations.
That was an exciting thing to do. And then I went to Congress for 4 days, and I had 70 meetings with all the members of the Senate and House Armed Services Committee, and I pled my case to them. I told them about what I'd learned and what they needed to do, and I was very, very specific.
All right, so this has been quite a journey for you. You've got another book to write, and I'll bet maybe more after that. I'm not sure you'll be done at that point.
Well, actually, I do. I started another book. The day that I finished the first book, I felt so free that I just started writing something I wanted to write.
Oh, you see? All right, you've been bit by the bug. Good. So that leads me to my last question. And what I'd like you to do is finish the sentence for me. If writing has taught me anything, it's taught me what?
Wow. How to go deep with emotion and with expression, full expression.